So I saw a video recently on how to realign your objects, and I was thinking to myself, wow, I don't do any of that. I have a completely different way of doing it, and so I thought I would share my technique with you as well. So I have this fire extinguisher here, and I want to get its pivot back into alignment so I can put it back to 0 and do more work on it. And as you can see, the pivot is definitely not in a good place for that. So what I'm going to do is use the pivot tools to realign the pivot so that I can put it back to 0. So if you hit D and you're not holding any hotkeys, you notice that the pivot gets moved and oriented based on your selections. So what I want to do is just to orient but leave the pivot centered. So what you can do is right click, say reset pivot, which is actually going to 0 the pivot. And then if I hold down control, it's only going to reorient my pivot like so. If I hold shift, it'll just do position. I'm not going to do that. Or actually, why not? Who cares? Just do it. So you'll see that the orientation stays the same, but the pivot moves around. So I can set, try and select the center. So instead, I'm just going to reset the pivot so it's centered. Hold down control to align it. And actually, it's kind of interesting. When I do that, you can see it kind of flips around. There, that's a good one. I like that. And then what I'm going to do is bake that pivot to the object. So by default, I still have 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1 in my channel box here. But if I go up to Modify, Bake Pivot, I'm going to open up the option box. I have the options to bake the position, orientation, or both. I'm just going to do both. And if I hit Apply, you notice I get a bunch of values in my channel box now. So then if I go in here and zero this out, there it is, down at 0, 0, 0, and it's perfectly vertical, so I can work on it again. Now the thing is, I do have other objects that I'd like to carry around along for the ride. So what I'm going to do is select all these guys, and then I'm going to deselect the main bottle, and then shift reselect it, hit P to parent, and now basically what I've done is I've parented all that geometry underneath there. That's something I normally wouldn't do for a variety of different reasons. But in this case, I'm going to do it so that I can put it back, all of those objects back to 0 and have them in position so I can work on them. Now, one of the other things I might do is actually just throw a locator in that same spot so that I can put these guys back there after working on them. Like so. Now, one of the things I wanted to show is what's actually happening under the hood. So I have some quick buttons up here that'll just show me all my pivot information. And if I go back to hitting D and doing a reset pivot, it's all kind of a mess now. But you notice that it did center my pivot, but I still have values over here. So let's try something like, I'm going to ungroup these guys, and I will freeze transformations. There we go. Cool. So when you freeze transformations, basically what you're doing is you're resetting where the pivot is, and you're resetting the values in your channel box. So if I was to go in here and put 0, 0, 0 in my scale and rotate pivot information, it's going to put the pivot back to 0. Of course, my object is still up here, but that's really just a component movement. So if I go back up in here and I do what we did before, which is to orient that manipulator. Now, so far, nothing's happened, but if I go up in here and say Modify, Bake Pivot, it's then going to zero out that information so the pivot stays where it is, and then move that information back into my translate rotate so that it's up. It's as if I put it 0, 0, 0, it's going to be at 0, 0, 0. If I leave it where it was, it's going to have values on it that got it to that position. I think I explained that a little bit wrong, but I think that that should help. And you notice that it's upside down, so what I can actually do if I go back up in here, if I hit D again, although it's not showing them to me for some reason. So weird. Orientation, there we go. Show orientation handle. You can see that it's kind of off there, so let me reorient it. There we go. And I can actually rotate this by hand and hit plus to make it a little bit bigger. And if I hold down J, let's see. Yeah, if I hold down J, it'll actually snap, which is kind of nice, so I can get it to where I want. Let's say I want it to, instead of being Y up, which actually is in the end what I do want, but let's say I wanted Z up, I'm going to use snapping to make it more discrete and explicit so that it doesn't end up getting out of hand here. If I was to try and do that manually, I would never get it. So by holding down J, I can snap. I actually like to have this set to relative, which is good. If you set it to Oh. Where'd it go? I guess there used to be a different one. All right, great. Never mind. Keep it at relative. And then we have it like that. And I can now go in and zero this out. The whole bottom is going to go down to 0. Oh, it's upside down. Perfect. That's what I wanted. Let's fix that. So I don't want it to be upside down. So I'm going to D, J. Doesn't make any sense, but I'll put Y down. Oh, I never baked it. That's why. Let's bake it. Rebake the pivot. Now it should get out of the ground. Upright. There we go. Just like we want it. All right. Well, I hope that's been helpful. Incidentally, if I want to get this bottle back to that space there, I do have scripts that I run, obviously. But Maya now has a really nice matcher. So you can select your object, select the locator, go to Modify, Match Transformations. You can match just translation, just rotation, just scale, which is nothing in this case, or match all. And also, if you wanted to, let's see if this works. I haven't used this one. Let's unparent all these guys. If I hit D, let's see here. For each object, probably because I froze it. But let's just try this. I'm going to go in here and center pivots for all these guys. So now I have pivots all over the place, but let's say we wanted to match to this last one. Let's see if that works. So select all these guys, select the bottle, and say match pivots. And now each of those objects that have a matching pivot, which is great about that, is now if I zero these guys all together, it's going to put them all at 0, but of course there's an offset because that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, that's a good way you can move your pivots around and move your channels around on your objects to get them back to where you need them. All right, well, I hope that wasn't too rambling and was helpful, and see you next time.